All right, Mark, you're recording. You're looking dapper as ever, my friend.
Dapper and slightly
All
hungover.
right, you ready? Let's do this.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bonding with Mark and Andy. We're still continuing on with our history of Ian Fleming and the James Bond character himself. Today, we're going to pick up talking about the movies coming into, or the books becoming produced into films. And we'll talk just a little bit about the early films, the production company, producers of Saltzman and Broccoli. We'll get a little bit of history of those two, and then we'll discuss Connery and the oft overlooked George Lazenby.
Good old George.
so so Mark, let's discuss. So the films we talked last episode how it was made in America had kind of dipped their fingers into the James Bond pie, which we both have not seen, but we will endeavor to see, and that would be another episode we talk about that one. But Doctor No becomes the first film that they make.
I think it's the fifth book, but it was the first movie that they made. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we've previously talked about, it was done mainly because it could be shot in on one
It was
location.
all in one location, which was Jamaica. So they
And your
shot it there.
and your note here that you sent me says that Ian Fleming first wrote Doctor No as a television outline for film producer Henry Morgenthau III to promote Jamaican tourism
Yeah, I've heard
industry.
that. I think that's true. But if the deal fell through, it didn't happen, and that's when he started talking to Harry. I think it was Harry Saltzman first. He wanted to buy all of the Bond books and turn them into movies. Couldn't afford to do it for one reason or another. Got introduced to Cubby Broccoli. They teamed up, and off they went.
And we talked in another episode about how he sold all the rights to Salzman for the James Bond novels for
I think it was
$50,000,
50 grand, wasn't it? Yeah,
with
50,000.
exception of Casino Royale and Thunderball.
Because Thunderball, I mean, you'll have to get into that at a later date. But Thunderball, he wrote the outline for it. The plot came. It was a combination of him and a guy called Kevin McClory and somebody else whose name I forget. But they were going to come up with a James Bond story. It didn't work out. But Ian Fleming took the basis of what they decided together and turned it into the novel for Thunderball, and then got sued for it. And then that went on for years and years and years. That dragged on for a very long time. Years and years.
That's fit. Yeah, we got to definitely dive into that a little
Yeah.
bit. So your notes tell me so after Salzman gained the rights for the novels, he initially had trouble financing the project.
That's right. So he got Broccoli in. They teamed up, and United Artists, I think, was the film production company to start with.
So I know I've asked you before. Broccoli was a producer or
They
a
were
money
both Saltzman
man.
and Broccoli were both, movie producers, TV, that sort of thing, and they were angling for the Bond books, and finally managed to strike a deal between the two of them, and off they went. And they stayed together until I think it was 1975. I think it was the mid 70s, and then it all went horribly wrong, as these things do.
Yeah. Well, it says here. Let's see. Screenwriter Wolf Mankiewicz introduced Saltzman to Albert R. Cubby Broccoli, who himself, I guess, wanted the rights to the novels and attempted to buy them from Salzman, but Salzman did not want to sell the rights to Broccoli, and instead they formed a partnership to make the
Partnership,
films.
yeah.
They created two companies. Dan Jack, is that what it's?
Dan Jack, which is apparently the two wives' names. I think one of the wives was called Danielle, the other one was Jacqueline, I think. And
Okay.
they combined the names. And then the main production company that everybody's heard of is Eon Productions.
Yeah.
They're the people that produce the film. You'll see that at the credits at the beginning of the movie. And that's supposed to stand for everything or nothing.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be such a massive gamble at the beginning. They called their company Eon, everything or nothing.
But it's such a cool word, Eon.
It's
I like
great.
that.
Yeah, Eon, everything or nothing.
So they said I guess they struggled to get the films made. A number of Hollywood film studios, they didn't want to fund the films, finding them quote, too British and too blatantly sexual.
There was a lot of that in those
So I
novels.
guess in the 60s, yeah, they were pretty risque.
Well,
Like I said,
things started to change in the 60s, didn't they, with the Beatles and all the rest of it. But in the late, mid to late 50s, things were slightly different. Bond was a little bit risque.
well, and like I said in my review of Doctor No, there is very brief nudity, and that's a PG-13 film. And I was like, again with the Ursula Andress walking around in her bikini, which I think at that time was pretty,
all pretty daring stuff.
yeah, pretty daring if that's the right word to use. The G's pretty easy on the eye, so again, I'll reiterate that. So we go on with eventually the two received authorization from the United Artists to produce Dr. No to be released in 1962. As you stated earlier, the partnership between Broccoli and Salzman lasted until 1975 when tensions during the filming of The Man with the Golden Gun led to an acrimonious split, and Salzman sold his shares of Danjaq to United Artists.
I think he was heavily in debt at the time. There was all sorts of stuff going on. So, yeah.
Oh, God, I mean, imagine what that's worth now.
Mm.
I mean, you do what you got to do at the time, but
yeah,
could they imagine they're sitting on a
lot of money involved with Bond now?
a billion-dollar industry, billions. Anyway, I say that all the time. So let's get to the movies. The casting. Back in '61, there was a very slim casting budget for Bond. Cary Grant, David Niven, Patrick McGowan, and Richard Johnson all turned down the role for various reasons.
Apparently so.
And I think we talked about that in Dr. No. We put one of our episodes, we talked about Cary Grant, who was, a star. Definitely a star.
Apparently, Cary Grant was up for doing it, but he only wanted to do one film, and that was no good.
Yeah, again, like, what were you thinking? Cary Grant could have been a star.
Could have been a star,
yeah. Then you said your other note. You say to me, 28-year-old model Peter Anthony was the winner of an open quote Find James Bond casting contest, but was ruled unsuitable by the producers.
Apparently, he looked great, but he wasn't an actor. So
I'll have to dig up a picture of him for this. Peter Anthony. That's when they found the Scottish star Sean Connery was an actor with many stage and screen credits already under his belt. When he met the producers, his macho personality, panther-like poise, and refusal to do a screen test.
The dog.
That's apparently not either is or not a fan of Connery.
I think she likes Sean Connery. She got all excited when she heard his voice.
Well, everybody has to like Sean Connery, right? How do you not like
Connery's great. We've talked about this before. He's just got an elegance to him that you either got style or you don't. And Connery does, and that's it.
Yeah, he really just kind of oozes out of him. And, because I wasn't a Bond guy, my first knowledge that I was trying to think of this the other day, Connery first came on my radar I'd seen him before, but I really started watching his films during the Untouchables movie.
Yeah.
And his iconic line in that movie where he's this street cop and he's got the English Scottish accent and kind of really developing that caricature of himself that he became. And the line where he says, where Kevin Costner's talking to him as Elliot Ness and about he's talking to him about you just got to be tougher than the gangs.
Oh, you put one of theirs in the morgue or something like that.
Yeah, he says if he stabs one of yours, you shoot one of his.
Yeah.
If he puts one of yours in the hospital, you put one of his in the morgue. I was like, holy shit, that's an awesome line, and he delivered it so well. And I was like, yeah, this Connery guy, I think he's got a future.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I had missed out on the previous 20 plus years of his career, but
he was a jobbing actor as far as I know. I think he was in South Pacific. He was in a musical. He was a jobbing actor. The Bond role shot him to stardom, obviously, but yeah, he was a jobbing actor at the time.
Yeah, well, I think we mentioned it in the last episode, was the first movie review episode, Dr. No, that he was first real leading role was Gilbert Sullivan in The Little People. Gilbert
Oh,
O'Sullivan.
that's right. Something
That was his first leading
yeah.
role. He'd been in movies, but that was his first where the world saw him as a leading man, and it was
Right.
like a musical. He was singing and dancing and whatnot. But let's see. It says here is he refused to do a screen test, which impressed the duo, and most importantly, impressed their wives, and they snapped him up for a $50,000 per movie deal, 6-picture deal.
And that in itself
60s.
would cause problems later down the line, because imagine how much money they were earning by the time the third film comes out, and poor old Connery's only getting 50 grand a go.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
caused trouble.
Brilliant on their part
Yeah.
to snatch up this guy, slightly unknown, and to lock him in for 6 movies at a paltry. And now 50,000 back then, I'm sure, was quite a nice sum of money.
But compared to what it started to earn for other people, that's not very much money at all.
It's not. It's a little bit of a, hey man, a little smack in the face.
Yeah.
Was the line that you've told me once before is they weren't sure about him until they allegedly watched him leave from their office window, and the way he crossed the street, he moved like a cat.
Yeah.
Connery has an unmistakable cool about him. They both agreed he was the man for the job. And of course, the iconic scene where the world first gets its glimpse of Sean Connery and James Bond is at the casino table in Dr. No.
And he looks amazing. He's in black tie. He's in extremely luxurious surroundings. He looks like he owns the place. It's a great introduction to a character.
He looks cooler than any of us could hope to be.
Yeah.
That's really the end of the day. It's like he's in that's that era of the 60s over here in the States was like the Rat Pack, and you had Sinatra and Dean Martin and all those guys were this kind of just, you wanted to be them. And there was no chance in hell you're ever going to be as cool as these guys, but you could aspire. You could do your hair right. You could get a nice suit, smoke 60, 70 cigarettes a day.
Well, Bond movies gave you a glimpse into a completely different world that was out of reach to most ordinary people in 1962, 63. And that glamorous sort of world that you got a glimpse of, people wanted more of it. People wanted to be James Bond. They wanted the women. They wanted to drive the cars. That's why it was such a success.
In reality, that's as a guy, I mean, growing up, like that's why you do what you do. You're trying to impress your maybe a future partner or spouse, who knows, but you're doing what you can to look nice. That's why you drive the car you drive. That's why you wore a bandana around your neck or you tied it around your leg. That
was a long time ago.
Oh my God, I found some old pictures. I've off camera, I've told Mark my father is moving from our childhood home, and there's photo albums galore, and I keep finding these pictures, and I send them to various friends.
You dressed up as Kiss as a teenager, slightly disturbing.
I dressed as Kiss. I've got a picture I'll send you after this, Mark, that you can just kind of look at. It's a family photo. It is of the time. It's nothing I'm sure I will ever put out on social media, but I'll share it with my friends so they can laugh at me. But
send it over. I could do with a good laugh.
Always trying to get the ladies, Mark. It's always never in my life, even with a suit on, I could never pull off Bond. Or
not many people can.
Or Sinatra. But the beauty of film and I've said before, I do another podcast with a friend of mine where we review movies, and what I love about films and what I think you alluded to with the Bond films is it's escapism. For an hour and a half, you can sit there and you can imagine, like, it's like buying a lottery ticket. You always think you might have a chance to win, but you really don't. But for a few days, you feel good about yourself. You think, well, if I win the lottery, I'm going to do this. Or if I could, for this hour and a half, if I could be as cool as James Bond, man, in real life, would I handle a situation that way? I'm sure I wouldn't, but you'd like to think that you would.
For an hour and a half, it takes you out of your normal humdrum existence, and you become a gentleman adventurer in a world that few people get to see. What's not to like?
It lets you forget your life for a good hour and a half.
Your escapism, as you've just said.
So let's get back to our friend Sean Connery. The movies made Connery a global star. But he felt underappreciated on the terms of that initial deal, and he was released from his contract during the filming of his 5th film, You Only Live Twice.
Yeah, they fell out in a big way. Broccoli, Saltzman, and Connery as the money started rolling in, Connery felt he was being undervalued, wanted a share of the profits. They didn't want to share it with him, and it all blew up.
Yeah. And I get that. I mean, that happens all the time today. I mean, that's kind of a standard now, even not just in film and sports. I mean, you see holdouts where people, I mean, over here, it's usually football and baseball or basketball stars. They've signed an initial rookie contract for very little money, and next thing you know, their team goes on to win a championship because of this one player. And he's like, "Hey, got a little scratch, a little something for my effort."
Yeah,
and if they balk at it, the guy's like, "Hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to show up to training camp. How about that?" And you can start the season without the guy who got you to the Super Bowl or the World Series. And it's funny how quickly they'll come off the checkbook. Like, well, let's not get crazy.
It was short-sighted. They should have made him a partner, kept him happy, and they'd have kept going. But
yeah. I mean, how many films you think he would have done? Because he only did what, 5?
It was 5 up until 67. Then he came back in 71 for Diamonds. But they could have had a hell of a run if they'd kept him sweet and kept him happy. But money changes people, changes things.
As the great Cyndi Lauper once sang, "Money changes everything."
Indeed, it does.
I think she's right. So then we go on with Broccoli and Saltzman cast the net wide, looking for the replacement for Connery.
Yeah, there were all sorts of people they were looking at.
They considered actors as varied, and this is the notes you sent me: Oliver Reed, Terrence Stamp, John Richardson, and Timothy Dalton, who, as we know later, does make an appearance.
They looked at all sorts of people after Connery.
Yeah, and then they got. So they found this. They ended up settling on an Australian model who is famous for doing a Fry's chocolate cream TV advertisement.
George Lazenby getting the role of Bond is quite legendary. The way he managed it and pulled it off, then went ahead and did one picture and said, "No, I don't want to do it anymore." It's become the stuff of legend.
George Lazenby. So tell us what you know about this gentleman.
George, I think at one point, he's from Australia. At one point, I think he was a car salesman. Then he got into bit part acting in TV commercials or something in Australia. Hence he was the face of Big Fry chocolate at one point. He was the guy that came in with a massive chocolate bar on his shoulder or something.
I'll have to find that. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I think the advert with him in his chocolate advert is him carrying a great big bar of chocolate on his shoulder, something like that. But anyway, he was in England. They were looking for Bond. He went out and got a haircut so he looked like Connery. He went to Connery's old tailor, got one of his old suits that he hadn't picked up, and basically walked into the production offices of Eon and said, "I hear you're looking for James Bond. Here I am." Just blagged his way in, apparently.
I mean, what a massive set of courage there.
Well, yeah, exactly. He's got some cojones. Is that what they say in the States? Cojones, yeah. Apparently, he walked in and basically blagged it and got right on.
So the note that you sent me says he impressed the producers and Peter Hunt, the director, with his confidence, not to mention the stunt coordinator who he accidentally punched for real, breaking his nose during the screen test.
Yeah.
You add in all respect, Lazenby gives a singular performance in Her Majesty's Secret Service.
When I was a boy growing up, it was all Roger, and George was sort of overlooked. He just did one, and Roger Moore became James Bond. But if you look back at it now, lots of people say it. It's a great film. It's got some great sequences in it. It's very well written, and George looks good in it. He does a good job. It's a shame he didn't stick around and do some more, because I think he'd have been very good.
Yeah, your notes kind of hint at that his relationship with the producers became fractured, and upon advice, he declined all the offers of a multi-picture deal, believing that Bond wouldn't last much longer than the 60s.
Well, because by the time that George got involved, it's 68, 69. So, yeah, end of the 60s, it's hippies, it's flower power. And James Bond looked a bit passé, he thought at the time. He got some very bad management advice who told him not to do it. So he turned down the deal that they offered him and walked away, and then regretted it forever after, I believe.
Yeah, because do we ever really hear of Lazenby?
He's been in bits and pieces over the years, but for a long time he was very much the black sheep of the James Bond family. It's a shame because you look at the work now. Look at his film. He's great. He's good. He has his moments. He's good.
It's interesting, and I know off camera we've talked about this. There's probably a long list of actors and actresses, and probably comedians and musicians and whoever else you want to think of that, under either bad advice or inflated egos, made horrible decisions for their careers. The one that jumps to my mind right off the top of my head is the actor McLean Stevenson from the TV series MASH over here. MASH had been a surprise success in the sitcom world here in America. And after the third season, going into the third season, he played Henry Blake, the commander. McLean, he didn't want to be part of an ensemble. He wanted to be the star, so to speak. And he left probably one of the greatest series of American television way before it's peaked at its prime, because he thought he was a little bigger than the show. And I have seen interviews where he says he's regretted that most of his life. I mean, he's since passed, but he said, I just kind of, I think nobody wanted to be the second banana to Alan Alda, but there was no denying what he was going to become. But yeah, he did that. There's plenty of. There's an actor over here, David Caruso, who used to be in a TV series called NYPD Blue.
That's right.
And in the was it the 90s? That show was on fire. And he left after the second season because he thought he was
bigger than
superstar.
The show. Yeah.
And he had a small little bump in his career where he just really couldn't find anything good. Now he did come back and do a CSI spinoff, and he's I'm sure he's done quite well for himself. But just off the top of my head, you can think of things like that. Or we could speak to one of my favorite bands, Kiss, Peter Criss, who thought he was all the bee's knees with the hit song Beth. And he wanted to leave Kiss and have this massive, super successful solo career. And basically, he did not.
Yeah,
he needed Kiss, and that's another podcast. So we move back to the Bond films we talk about. Now, a lot of people. Now, again, I haven't seen it yet, but On Her Majesty's Secret Service is considered one of the better films in the series. Yeah. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, it's great music, great theme. It's got Diana Rigg as Tracy Bond in it, and she's amazing. I mean, Diana Rigg's great.
Is that the one? So I know this is off topic, but Bond is only tied down once, right? Is that?
Yeah, he marries once to Tracy Bond, Tracy DiVincenzo. She's the daughter of a crime lord, and they get involved. And he ends up getting married.
So that's this movie, though.
Yeah, okay. That's On Her Majesty's. And it's a shame because a lot of the criticism that George got was because his Bond was slightly softer than Sean Connery. He gets married, he falls in love, and all the rest of it. But George played it really well. I think he did. A lot of people look back at On Her Majesty's now and say it's a classic movie. So it's a shame he didn't do it anymore.
Yeah, I told you I had a guy I worked with who was he often said that he's an overlooked Bond and underrated, and that movie deserves a little more credit.
A little more love, a little more credit. Which is getting now. People have come to see it as that.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, our eyes are a little better as we get older, a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
So you say here the notes, after the Lazenby debacle, producers enticed Connery back one more time for 1971's Diamonds Are Forever.
That's right.
But it would soon be time to find another new Bond. Distributors.
I think they were desperate to get Connery back because Lazenby was seen at the time as such a complete disaster. So they offered him a record-breaking amount of $1 million. I think it was $1 million to come back. Plus, they financed 2 film projects of his choice that he could go off and do. So they tempted him back for one more, which was Diamonds Are Forever in 1971. But he looks, with the best will in the world, he looks a little out of shape. He's playing it for laughs. It's not really the Bond that. If you watch From Russia with Love, where it's all taken quite seriously, he's all lean and
Yeah.
and Super Secret Agent, and then you compare it to Diamonds Are Forever 9 years later. There's a massive difference in the way Connery looks and performs.
I
I
look
think.
forward to this progression. I really do.
Yeah.
And we'll discuss that in detail. So
He's a little heavier in Diamonds Are Forever, and the hairpiece is a little bit of a problem. But we'll talk about that another time.
that's great. So what do we got here? See, Distributors United artists were displeased by the previous recasting, and executives floated some American names for
Yeah, they
1973's.
came looking for American actors.
Yeah, so this is
Bond
interesting. Live
Bond's
and Let Die.
British and should always be played by an Englishman. I think, but yeah,
I agree. I will agree with that. But this is the names that you've sent me now. Well, we'll verify this, but it sounds correct, especially for the time. 1973, Live and Let Die. They were looking at Burt Reynolds,
apparently.
which I love Burt Reynolds.
I can't see him as Bond though.
Cannot see him as Bond. I will always see him as Smokey in The Bandit, and that's
cool.
unfortunate, but that's how I see him.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood, who he's got the toughness, but he's always going to be Dirty Harry to me.
He's always, slightly before Dirty Harry, but yeah, American Cowboy. But then at the 68, 69, he'd done Where Eagles Dare. He's a good-looking guy. You can see why they'd have a sniff around. The one that makes me laugh is Adam West. They weren't looking at Batman. I mean, if you look at Adam West at the time, he's a good-looking, sharp. Well, if he's not wearing the Batman outfit, if he's in a three-piece suit, he looks the part. He could have carried it off, but yeah, he's an American. It should be James Bond should be an English guy, I think.
Yeah, I mean Adam West, in again a beloved actor, because I'm a huge Batman fan. Unfortunately, and this is what typecasting does, is I cannot see Adam West as anything other than Batman, no matter what he does, and that's a shame because he was a good actor. It's just, I think if he'd have been cast, the Bond films would have been derailed horribly.
Yeah.
And I mean that with all the love and respect towards Adam West. That just would have been a horrible.
No, it wouldn't have worked.
I mean, out of those three, Clint Eastwood would have been your best bet, and I don't know if that would have even worked because Eastwood comes off, to me, very stiff as an actor, not as fluid as cat-like as Connery would. So
doesn't have that charm, that certain je ne sais quoi that Connery
exactly. So we're going to leave off with this. We're going to end this one with the facts that eventually the studio agreed that a British actor should always play Bond. Roger Moore.
Good old Roger.
And we will leave it with that. We will pick up our next episode to breaking down and talking in depth about the great Roger Moore and his run as Bond. Excellent. So with that being said, Mark, let's bid adieu for now.
Farewell, Nashville.
You too, England. Hungerford. It's so early, my tongue isn't even working correctly at this point.
You gotta have a coffee, I think.
I've got to have another cup. This one
another
here.
One.
Just so you know, Mark, I'm drinking the PG Tips.
Oh, good boy, good boy.
That's my Stephen King mug, my red rum mug. But I feel when I talk to you, I need to be drinking my.
Nice cup of tea.
I don't drink a proper tea like you and my wife would drink with the cream in it. I do not. I put a little lemon juice, and some sugar.
Oh, very good.
But for some reason, and I will try this. I promise you, I will try it with milk. But boy, it just seems wrong to me.
I like it. Splash of milk, couple of sugars, nice and dark. That's the way I like my tea.
Like as you called it, a builder's tea.
Builder's tea, man. Builder's tea.
Yeah, just like the Scottish egg. I can't quite wrap my head around it, but someday, Mark, I promise you, I will try these things. And you, my friend, will try chili dog.
A three-way chili cheese dog. I want one.
Yeah. All right, Mark, I bid you farewell. Keep bonding,
Take care, my friend.
This has been a Touch of Madness production, brought to you by the creative minds at Tommy Twins Media.